We are still in the section of workers versus the rich, and we move to it's in the appendix, and we're moving to bad choices with an understanding of maybe an attempt to understand the thinking of the rich, even though it's wrong. Anyway, the thinking of the rich. The rich cannot understand why we do not work our heads off to get rich, even though it's becoming almost impossible. Well, let's say it isn't becoming impossible. Except for the inventors. There's no way you can save enough money at 0.5% interest in the bank. There's no way you can make any money since the stock market is rigged. The average common person, if you want to call them that, is not going to become rich. And the rich really do not understand why we don't work our heads off, work 80 hours a week so that we will become rich like they did. They can't understand at this point in time that their money was made in a different time. Their parents, their grandparents, we had the prohibition, we had the boom of the railroads, we had the boom of oil, gasoline being sold at horrible rates in terms of overcharging. They can understand those things. They cannot understand someone who asks, have you ever in your life walked into a beautiful garden and just smelled the roses? And they say, I mean, really stop and become aware of the garden. Touch the flowers, smell them, look at the hummingbirds, feel the calmness of it all, and just for one moment become one with nature, to which the rich respond. Now you understand better how there's a difference between the two when you see how they respond. They respond and say, what do you get out of that? Think of the thousands of people worshiping you as you walk down the red carpet. Think of the flashes as the reporters take your picture. Think of all those people worshiping you as you go about your spending your money. It doesn't get any better than that. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. You have to get it in your head that this is the way they see it. The flower in the garden is the way we see it. Not all of us, because we're awful busy trying to earn enough money to just eat. But some of us, they say, really stop and become aware of the garden, touch the flowers, smell them, look at the hummingbirds, feel the calmness of it all, and just for a moment become one with nature, to which they respond. What do you get out of that? Think of the thousands of people worshiping you as you walk down the red carpet. Think of the thousands of people worshiping you as you walk down the red carpet. Think of the flashes as reporters take your picture. Think of all those people, now we're talking about people in the stores, worshiping you as you go about spending their money. It just doesn't get any better than that. So we all ask, what's wrong with those rich people? Two totally different wants and views. Because the garden group is not so interested in power, and advertising was created by the other group and used in a very negative manner, the garden group has absolutely no say. The garden group has absolutely no say. It's what we said all along, that those who are insanely rich have no common concept, number one, but they have no aversion of killing people. And you're saying, the Rockefellers never shot anybody. No, that isn't how they do it. They do it secondary. It's like a beautiful system they've got where, because of the financial things that they do, people die of starvation or lack of medical help. That's killing people. But you see, it's okay because it's second. It's not them. It's, a second thing. It's always a second thing with them. They begin to figure it out that if you go into a corporate headquarters, this gorgeous girl is sitting behind the desk asking you how she can help you. And you're thinking, wow, they're so nice. You see what we're saying? There's always a second layer. You don't get to the second layer. There's even the third layer, but you don't even know who they are. But you don't get to the second layer. You're always one of the things that I had a difficulty with when they said the stopping of BP because they had polluted the whole Gulf of Mexico, just shut them down, bankrupt them. And I'm thinking to myself and saying to them, hey, what about the people in the gas stations that are pumping the gas? They didn't do anything. And it's like there's a little bit of silence, and it's going to be from them difficult because they're going to have to answer it. But they say every single thing that the super rich did caused people to lose their jobs, and so what? That's what they said. So what? So, what's wrong with these rich people? Two totally different wants and views. That was what they said. Because the rich have what they want, and then they go about buying so much more junk just to show how rich they really are, because they have stolen so much from us, and that makes them much better. We need Dodge City to put your guns in the sheriff's office kind of thing, and we need it before the next Civil War starts. Now, what they said about the BP was there are people that are going to lose their jobs. There are nice people out there that are going to lose their jobs. See, they don't care if they take a whole industry, steel industry, over to China. They don't care if those people lost their jobs. They don't care. They don't never give it a second thought. It's not like they're boy, it's so hard to explain to people. It's it's hard to explain to you who care that they have no care. It isn't that they say we're going to get those stupid steel workers. No, they have never even given them a second thought. What are you going to do? I want to make more money making steel in China. That's what I'm going to do. But what about these people that are going to, lose their jobs? Oh well. And so now we say to them, the people that are BP, find another place, maybe find another gas station, take your gas station and change it to Shell or something. You'll get through, but BP will go under. And at that point in time, all the other corporations are going to open their eyes and say, whoa, we're in big trouble. We're in big trouble. What's the power? The power, they have the power over you. They have tremendous power. They can hire and fire. You can bankrupt them. You can bankrupt them within a month. You can bankrupt them totally within a month. You have the power. That's what we're trying to tell you. Over and over again, we'll try to tell you. You have the power. You just don't realize it, and they're terrified that you might figure it out. Now, since we're in this section where we're talking about the bad choices, in a discussion about the very subject with Jesse, John said, well, the 1% tell us that the poor are poor because they make terrible choices. Okay, now, the steel workers in Pittsburgh made terrible choices. They were working for the steel company. And now they want to go on and see there's all these things that you get. They make terrible choices that, so what? They lost their job. That's the way life is. And they're just not as smart as we are. And if they're really as stupid as we say they are, they're going to make really bad choices. Basically, they want to say over and over again, if they're as smart as we are, they'd be rich too. It's not our fault that we were born smarter. So let's look at the bad choices that each group makes and just take a good look at it. Maybe then we can understand how to make better choices. First, we have to choose to have rich mothers and fathers. That gives us money to go to the best schools, have the best stuff, be able to gain the investment monies if we have a good investment idea, or at least good paying job if we have to work. And Jesse said, that's not a choice, John. How many people can choose to have rich parents? That's ridiculous. Okay, I have to admit, everyone can have to admit that not everyone can be born to rich parents. That eliminates the argument. How about them working for 16 hours a day and saving half their income until they have enough to invest in their excellent idea? Or they can retire, John suggested. Jess asked, okay, what's wrong with that? And so John has to say, it sounds good except for two things in this day and age. First, the banks don't even pay 1% on the savings because the 0.5%ers took, and in brackets, stole our investment money, told us the banks were broke and therefore need to be bailed out, and then be allowed to charge more and give back less. I mean, you got to realize that they at one time were giving 12% back, and they were doing just fine. Banks we're talking about now. Now they don't even give 1% back, and they're doing just fine. Yeah. I mean, the savings accounts used to give us 10 to 13%, and that was when the rich were gathering their money, and and now you are lucky to get 1%. Believe me. How do you build an investment that way? I might add that those who were becoming rich in those times were doing what they said they did legally, with legal means, but legal and moral was never considered. Legal was considered, and a lot of them did it illegally. Their grandparents did it illegally, their parents did it illegally, and they now have the money. The point of the whole thing is that you're attempting to make a massive amount of money, and what they're saying is what we're saying, or John said to Jesse, that you can't do it anymore. We don't have the alcohol prohibited. We got pot. There could be some people making some really good money with pot. But the overchargers had alcohol, thanks to Prohibition. They made tons of money with that. They had oil for a new thing called cars. Electricity was needed for all the new appliances, and of course the need to be able to get to California for so many reasons, not the least of which was gold. Thus there was a need for the railroad. All of these things became a source of present-day massively rich bankers, of course, you understand. Add to that the oil rich like the Rothschilds who have been robbing the poor forever. The old rich, not the oil rich. Add to that the old rich like the Rothschilds who have been robbing poor forever, financing both sides of each war, overcharging in the banking system, including the Federal Reserve, which, you do any research on it all, you get recommend that you don't do any research at all, because we absolutely cannot have the civil war they want. They forced industry and governments to move in the direction they demanded, which is always beneficial to them, and you have what you have today. You've got the problem with the overchargers, and the ones that we're talking about are in the 1% and maybe even in the 0.5%. Second problem is that if truth were known, almost no one in the 5%ers ever worked 16 hours a day in their life. Not at a minimum wage we're stuck with at this point. At this point, they made their money another way, and that's what we're looking for. So now what we're saying is that they made bad choices. So I mean, the rich made good choices. But are those choices available now? So 16 hours a day suggestion is eliminated. No, that's not going to work. Besides, the 5.5%ers put us in a $7 to $8 trillion debt just recently, and we have to pay that debt off. Before you can even start making you rich, you have to pay off the $7 to $8 trillion that they just stole from us. And they made it a debt that the government has to pay. Add to that the cost of education, or at least the increase in cost, overcharging, and there's an inflation that isn't happening to seniors, but everyone else is seeing less bird seed in their bag, less popcorn in the same bag, and now half full. small cans of soup for the same price, and worst of all, a bigger hole in the toilet paper. No poor person chose those problems, but the poor are paying for them. Just to point out some of the differences between then and now. The interesting thing is that there are those negative things, those negative things were caused by the 0.5%. The choices the 0.5% made. And so Jesse asks, well, what do you mean? And John says, well, let's start with the facts. The advertising works, and we all have to understand that advertising work is a fact. And we've gone through that enough so that you know that at least we believe advertising is a fact, and advertising works. That means that if you can pay the cost of advertising, you can get people to do almost anything. To go on, that means that you can get people to pay much more for the same thing that was worth less back, before advertising, and the money that you pay more for that thing, like a bowl or a box of cereal, they end up buying advertising with it so that you no longer want that thing, but you have to have that thing. Now, that's what advertising does. You see, instead of wanting it, oh, I want that box of Cheerios. I have to have that box of Cheerios. I'm going to do anything I have to do to get that box of Cheerios. I will work, overtime to get that box of Cheerios. And what you're getting more than the original cost is the cost of advertising. And then by overcharging for that thing, which they can now do because the poor have to have it, you can become rich faster. The 5% does not realize that every 5%er knows that fact and uses it, thus making it go from a tiny increase to an insurmountable increase. What did they say? They said, the advertising makes the thing that you're supposed to buy a thing that you have to have instead of a thing that you want to have. And then that game that they play sets it up so that you have to pay more for a thing, and the more for the thing that you're paying is overcharge. It's money that hasn't got anything to do with the thing you're buying, and so the rich get rich faster. And the problem is that the 5%ers do not realize that every 5%er knows that fact and uses it, and that makes the increase in the cost of something which is so small that it hardly affects you at all, because they're all doing it, all of a sudden it becomes an insurmountable increase. They think the little increases in the cost makes no difference to the poor person's life because it's such a small amount. Of course, there's also and you understand that the small amount by all of the 5% becomes a horrendous amount. Of course, there's also the possibility they just do not care, and we would say they don't know. They don't even consider it. But that's the way it is. I'll tell you that the addiction to increasing your amount of money that you make is far stronger than any care you might have for the person suffering. And that's a fact. However, adding all these increases together gives the 5%ers a tremendous wealth and makes just that much harder for anyone else to move up the income level or income ladder. So you can see that this is a choice that the 5%ers made that changed things for the poor. Now, the poor didn't make the choice. The poor is addicted to those things that advertising makes in their brain become from a want to a have to have. And that's a poor choice, but it's forced by the 5%ers that are using advertising. The poor never made the choice, so it would appear that the 5%ers made a bad choice for the poor in this case. And as you can see, they are making numerous bad choices for the poor as we go along. Moving manufacturing out of the country to take advantage of other countries' cheaper labor force is another choice that gives no advantage to the poor person, but did wonders for the 5%ers' pocket. So we have not, and it's legal. Yeah, what you're basically doing is you're eliminating the jobs in this country and taking them overseas because they'll work for next to nothing, and then you take the steel over to China and then you make a product and you bring that product back, and all of that cost of transportation and stuff like that is less than the producing it in this country. So we're set here looking at nobody's going to make money like the 5%ers did. So we still haven't found a way for the average person to become rich. So we go on. How about coming up with an invention and charging for it? How many people can come up with an invention is a problem, but it's a way. And few people are inventors, and few people have the ability to invent something that they can charge more for. But it happens. It's one of the things that still happens. So they put it out there in the advertisement so that you can see, sneaky advertisement, so that you can see that it still can happen. It still can happen. You can name probably 300 to 5 people that have done it, maybe 4. Bill Gates. Hidden in Gates' computer invention was the frequency used. You have to understand something, and one of the things that they put in brackets and is a little strange, hidden in the Gates computer invention was a frequency used to block our ability to communicate subconsciously with each other, which Gates was well paid for by it. That's a conspiracy theory, I guess. Interesting thing, the frequency they use for computers blocks our ability to communicate subconsciously with each other. There was a doctor who was doing research on communicating. He said, the subconscious communicating, the ability to communicate with somebody without talking doesn't happen. And he did research and he found out, oh dear, it does happen, and it does happen, but it could be blocked, I suppose. And so somebody asked him, well, how would you block it? He said, well, it's an interesting thing that the frequency they use for the computer is blocks the subconscious communication with each other, and went on and didn't say anything more about it. But now that you know that, you look at it and say, Gates certainly was well paid, and it could have been paid by it to do the frequency that he might not have even known. Do a frequency so we can't communicate with each other because there's all these computer frequencies out there blocking our communication. Not very many people will get that kind of chance, so we still do not know a way for the general poor person to begin the journey to become rich. There's all manner of games used to keep the poor poor and the rich richer. Let me point out some of the games that help you begin to see the process. You do not understand that corporate tax increase is only passed on to the customer and takes little from the rich in proportion of the income, you understand, so the poor pay more. It is not such a good example because the rich see it as taking little money they have to pay for game, if you want to call it that, so they don't like that game very much, but it's still there. Corporate tax, tax the corporations, yeah, let's get them. So when you see the corporation tax being reduced, cheer, yay. What you're thinking is, oh my God, these rich people are going to make more money. No, they don't. Well, they do, but they can only make $400,000 a year, and then that tax goes into the government, or they stop charging so much for the product. So you got one or two choices there, and that works. Which is, by the way, the spider web thing that we're always talking about. This affects that. That affects this other thing. There's solutions to the problem that are taken care of by doing this, and so on and so forth. So now we can go to the claim that there is no inflation for the retired, hardly an inflation, because they don't get any increase in their pay. So the poor pay so much more for everything, and we get no increase in Social Security. That's a nice game to have. It's like have mothers and fathers pay more because of inflation, and get no increase in Social Security payments because the overchargers tell the government there's no inflation. Anybody, we watched 3% inflation when the parts for cars were increasing 30%. We watched it for years. We watched it when the homes become way more expensive. The apartments to rent were way more expensive. But the inflation didn't go up. Why didn't the inflation go up? Because the government was told by the overchargers to tell the people that there was no inflation. What about this car? It's 10 times more than it was. Well, that doesn't count because those are not stable inflationary things. We have to have stable things. Like, what are you talking about? Like, eggs. Eggs are pretty stable. Well, let's use that as an inflation thing. So they take everything that was inflating terribly and took it out of the basket, if you will, and put in eggs. And the inflation was 3%. What a game. And, they did it and they got away with it, and people heard it in the advertising, and so they said, okay, well, that's the way it is, so that's the way it is. Savings no longer pays enough to let a person retire comfortably on their retirement funds and interest that they made now, and they now have to spend more of their saved money on their retirement than they planned on. Then even worse, if they try to invest in something to get comfortably to the end, the investments are no longer safe because they cannot use the banks at 0.5% or savings and loan at maybe 1% at the most as a way to protect their investment until their death. Less than 1% will just not make it. They are instead required to take a chance in the stock market and other risky investments just to keep afloat. The rich love that game because all the investment schemes are terribly rigged in the favor of the rich. The risk they now face helps to keep the retired stressed and uneasy about what's left of their life. Amazing how much the overchargers do love to make poor people uneasy. They just love that. So, we have people that are looking for an investment that will give them a return of, let's just say 12%. 12% is a comfortable amount of money. 50%, 100% is great. But if you're going to do that, you should take a risk, and that's the way it should be. But what about 12%? That should be a steady thing, kind of an interest to get on your money, and probably the retirement income forms of investment and savings would get you through to your retirement in a proper manner. But that's no longer available. Used to be with the banks, will be with the banks again, and that's part of the spider web. We're going back to the banks and saying you will give 12%. That's what you have to do. You're going to give the no, not 12%. You will give the person 6% if he gives you money in a nice safe bank. If you want to go into the stock market, which is highly regulated now, and not owned by the stockholders, but owned by the businessmen that are out there to make their business work, you can get 12%. It's a little shakier, but not a whole lot. And the businessmen and the rich are complaining. Now, remember that they're going to try to set it up so that the, let's say, low middle class or low or upper poor people can actually retire and have money to live on top of their Social Security, which is now the same as the minimum for the person that's working, which is the way it should be, which is another piece of that spider web, you see. Over here, this has changed, so that takes care of that, and over here, this has changed, so that takes care of that. And you will catch the fly instead of just having one strand. So they've said over and over and over and over again, always read the whole thing. Read book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, read the whole thing, read the appendix, so you will see how things work. So that's what they're asking you to do, and they're asking you to do it all the time. Now, here's the other problem. The businessman and the rich are complaining because the Social Security is too expensive, and they have to pay one half the cost of Social Security while the worker is working. Now, we told you that because of the increase in the production and no change in the amount of money that anybody paid for a worker, they paid for their Social Security totally, and the business doesn't pay half like they show you that they do, because the worker is paying half by not getting overtime paid for overtime, not getting paid for increase in production. The game is that the employer's got the worker to work even harder just to keep his or her job, and there's no increase in pay. And you understand with the robots coming in, if you remember us going back to the unions cannot gather all the people together and make it one person, and then the one person negotiates for income. That's not going to be done anymore, because it really off balances or makes the balance wrong. The employer should pay for the workers' quality work, and they should pay a minimum amount of it. And if they want to have somebody who's much better at it, they can pay more. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way the economic system in this country was designed to be. Was if there's something that has more value, you charge more for it. If you charge more for it, you can pay your employees more, on and on and on it goes. And we all understand that's the way it's supposed to be, but that's not the way it is. And part of the reason is because there are fewer workers. And part of the reason and the fewer workers is a horrible game, because what you have is the robotic system, or the AI system, artificial intelligence system, that's taking our jobs away from us. You'll have robots giving you a sandwich at noontime at a little store in the big city. You'll have artificial intelligence robot. What would you like? I'd like a ham sandwich. Okay, here it is. Instead of a person, and those jobs go away. And as those jobs go away, you end up with less jobs. As you have less jobs, you have the same thing the union had. You can get people to work for next to nothing, because you've got less jobs. It's like the 10,000 workers in the steel industry got together and made a union. And the 10,000 people were all one person, and they said, "Now we want more money, or we'll walk." Well, if it's one person walking, the businessman couldn't care less. But all 10,000 walk. That's it. They're done. So they had to give more money, and it warped the way our economy is supposed to work. Now you have less jobs, and it warps the way the economy is supposed to work. I got 10 people standing out there outside the door waiting to take your job from you. Now you work harder and work better, and you work overtime, but you're not going to get paid for it, and you make me better products, and I'm making more and more money, and you're making just the same as you did 20 years ago. Now, is that true? Yes. If you take inflation out of the picture and look at it, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. You're not making 1 penny more than you did 20 years ago. They can make a huge profit as this money is fed into the stock market and has to buy their stock. You just have no idea the games they play with the stock market, and that's one of the things that, well, probably have a pretty good idea now in this time period, because the stock market was used to take a third of your money, at least a third, if not more. You realize the stock prices will have to go up and up. Oh, you understand what what they're talking about here? They make a huge profit as the thought that what they really have to do, and it was somebody stopped it. I don't know who and I don't know why, but they were going to take Social Security and put it into the stock market so that the money you'd get more as a person retiring than you get now, because the stock market makes more money than the government gives you for the money that they got for that you paid in. The profit they make on the money you paid in and interest and so on and so forth was going down and down. So they said, let's put it in the stock market and they can make 20% and everybody will be retire rich. You realize that their stock prices will have to go up and up and up as there's less and less stock to buy. They say in brackets, oh, probably shouldn't have told you that. It's one of those things that you begin to realize they probably shouldn't have told you a lot of things in order for the rich to stay rich. Then, of course, they'll maintain the market so that, again, they will get at least one third put in their pocket when they make the market fall. They make the market go up a little bit and up a little bit, and you keep buying, and it goes up a little bit and up a little bit, and then it all crashes. And they take the third of your income, or a half, that's in the stock market, and they say thank you. No, they don't even say that. They just look at you like, boy, that was a bad choice, which is what we're talking about here. The poor choice that the poor make was to buy stock, which was the only option for making a little bit more than the 0.5% savings from the bank. That has become their favorite game so far. So, spiderweb. What do we see there? We saw that the banks are being regulated to give more interest for the money that you invest. We saw the stock market be highly regulated so that the interest that you get, or the income that you get from stock, might be up to 10%, 12%, but no more. And that the company can then make whatever money and that gives them a goal. We got to get up to the point where we're making more money, but the stock person isn't. That's the game they're going to play. So what you look at there is always all of the things are tied together, and the stock market is such that it's highly regulated, and they have to, if the company's making X amount of dollars, they have to give you 12% ultimately, but they can't give you any more. They can give you less if the company isn't doing well, and that's the risk that you take. But in the understanding of that risk, you're talking about the manufacturer and not the stock market person making the decisions. So spider web, you have these things change, Wow, that makes it better. And what they do all the time is make it better. The rich, number 5 possibility, the rich increase the federal debt so there's more interest to be paid on the debt. They loan the money to the government and they get paid much more as the poor have to pay. They loan the money to the government, the rich, and they get paid much more as the poor have to pay it all back with interest. Another good game. 6th one, and this is a good one. They find things that the poor truly have to have, like medical treatment, dental work, insurance, TVs, phones, medicine, automobiles, and they raise the price way above the cost so the poor have to pay more. That game is becoming a favorite as the population gets older. What do they say? What we said all the time. If you have to have it, they'll raise the price. Don't believe it? Take a good look at your medical charges right now. Not that that isn't going to change, because it is. But take a look at the medical charges right now. They're going up and up and up, and what's going up is the administration. Has nothing to do with the doctor, nothing to do with the nurse, nothing to do with the equipment. That's all stayed about the same. But the administration costs are going up and up and up. How many administrators heal you? How many administrators set your bones? How many administrators do the operations? Do you see? Do you see? Number 7. You say the rich have to pay the same cost, like the medical and stuff. But that's true, but the percentage in relation to the income is so much different. You could pay 20% of your income and not be able to eat next month. They pay 20%. They pay the same cost, and it's like 0.5% of their income. So the situation that you're dealing with there is that the rich have to pay but in relation to the income that they have, the hurt, if you will, is totally different.